Trust me, man, it's a bad scene. Ugh. Writing a good novel is as much about avoiding bad things as it is about not avoiding good things. It's not as much about not doing the right thing as it is about not screwing up by not doing the wrong things. Pretty sure I screwed up that last sentence. Writing a good novel is as much about keeping bad scenes out of it as putting good scenes into it. And one of the worst scenes that you can have is a scene designed to simply dump information, which is also called an info dump, which is just those two words reversed, I guess. Info dumping is not just something that readers often don't enjoy, it's also a sign of low writing skill and low effort. It's an easier way to deliver information, but also one that's less effective. Even if readers enjoy reading your info dump, there's a good chance that presenting information in this way will be harmful to your overall novel. I want to lay out to you what exactly an info dump is, exactly why it's a problem, and approximately why you should avoid it. So let's talk about why you and info dumps should start seeing other people, because you're going to dump them. Info dumping is anytime attention is pulled from the narrative in order to deliver expository information. This is information that may be useful to the reader, more on that later, but it's information that is not necessary for understanding the linear sequence of events in the story. It's information that provides an additional context. If a character walks by a house that's painted red, that's description, not exposition. The reader needs to know the house is red in order to picture it, and knowing that the house is red is part of the linear sequence of events that happen in the novel. If I say that the house used to be painted blue 20 years ago, then that's expository information. It's additional context that's not necessarily evident from the scene itself. An info dump is when you deliver an excessive amount of that expository information at the expense of the rest of the narrative. I don't have an exact number for when something becomes an info dump, so let's just say if you have more than 50 kilograms of expository information per ton of narrative, you have an info dump. I think that's a good rule of thumb. I want to emphasize here that your story needs expository information, at least some level of it. The challenge is in delivering that expository information. The goal should be to deliver it in a non-info dumpy way, not to eliminate it. You do need it. Delivering expository information becomes problematic for a few reasons. First, delivering it often means pulling attention away from what's happening in that scene. If the character's brakes aren't working and their car is careening towards the big oak tree that's in front of the red painted house, and you're stopping the story to tell us that the house used to be painted blue, delivering that expository information pulls attention away from an exciting scene. It's not useful at that moment as the character is hurtling towards that oak tree to know that the house used to be painted blue. The second problem with expository information creeps in when we have too much of it in one section. This is either boring to read, or because of the density of information, the reader is likely to forget a lot of the information, especially if the salience of the information is not evident, which is the third problem with info dumps. Salience is just a more impressive sounding word for importance or relevance. Expository information delivered in the wrong place is likely to seem irrelevant to the reader. When you stop your story to deliver an essay on the history of an entire town, or a character's whole backstory from the time they were 7, or a long, complex explanation for how your magic cheese grater works, the reader may not know why that information is relevant. A lack of relevance means they won't have a reason to remember it or a reason to be interested in it. Probably the archetypical info dump is the good old encyclopedia of history and world building stuff stuck right in chapter 1 of a fantasy novel. Bonus points if we cover at least 8 generations of the monarchy and there's more than a dozen gods mentioned. Oh, and I really want to know about the import-export balance between every single nation in your world. The problem with this sort of info dump should be self-evident. Too much information with little relevance delivered in a way that delivers even getting to the action or narrative of the story. We are pulling attention away from the narrative, we are delivering way too much information, and the reader has not been given reasons why that information is important, so they're unlikely to remember it. Now, there are some readers who really eat this stuff up. There are some readers who actually do like info dumps, and the comment section below this video will be filled with people reminding me of that. But even if your reader likes the Wikipedia article at the front of your novel or the snippets peppered throughout, info dumps are still a bad way to deliver information. If you have critical expository information that the reader needs to understand in order to understand your novel, like how many bullets go in the gun or what happens when you grate mozzarella with the magic grater, you need to make sure they remember and digest that information. Even if the reader loves your passages about exposition, if they don't have a narrative to add salience to the information, they are unlikely to remember any of it. This is why you should always strive to deliver expository information when it is relevant to what's happening in the narrative, and make sure that you don't deliver too much of it at one time. If using the magical cheese grater on mozzarella opens a portal to hell, you can either state this fact through exposition with some explanation that's dumped somewhere, or you can have a scene where a character is making pizza, accidentally opens a portal to the underworld, and then finds out that Satan wants pineapple on his pizza. And yes, if you enjoy pineapple on pizza, you enjoy the same pizza toppings as the devil. The best way to deliver expository information is not to treat it as expository information at all, but rather have a description or some kind of action that demonstrates that information through the narrative. We're still delivering the information, but the nature of the delivery shifts from an info dump to a description or an action where the information gets demonstrated. We learn that the house used to be painted blue when the character sees some of the peeling red paint and the blue sticking out from underneath it. We learn about the magic cheese grater's proclivity to open portals to the netherworld when Satan appears in our protagonist's kitchen. Demonstrating information in this way improves the salience of the information because it's important to the scene, which will make it important to the reader. It also makes the delivery of the information more interesting because it's stuff the reader needs to know about in order to understand the scene. It plays into the action. If you're in a building and someone tells you where the fire exit is, you'd probably be meh. But if that building was on fire and someone told you that information, you'd be way more interested in hearing what they have to say, and you will also likely remember it better. This is what happens when you deliver expository information when it's relevant to what's happening in the story. People will eat up gobs of boring information and remember it well if that information is related to some kind of heightened emotional state, if it's presented alongside some kind of action or scene that they're interested in. I think it was Sanderson who used the metaphor of putting spinach in a smoothie to describe this kind of idea. You're giving the reader something that they need, expository information, alongside something that they want, the smoothie. At a more deeper level, this is also just how you tell a good story. A good narrative is not just about relating facts, it's about the emotional experience as you move through that narrative. This is one of the manifestations of show don't tell. An info dump is fundamentally telling information to the reader. Having a scene where the rules or the backstory or whatever of that info dump get demonstrated is a way to show information to the reader. Higher quality writing will naturally move away from info dumps because higher quality writing moves more towards the show end of the show don't tell spectrum. If you need to put an info dump in your novel, then it's a sign that your narrative is incomplete. Through the telling of your story, you haven't given the reader everything they need in order to fully experience that story. So the info dump serves as a crutch. When a character uses the magic cheese grater, the effects and actions and consequences should be clear based on the scenes where it's used. If there's additional information that the reader needs, or if the reader doesn't need that additional information, then it doesn't need to be presented in an info dump. Now, doing this is more difficult than just writing out a technical, dumpy way to deliver exposition. That's one of the challenges of storytelling. Part of what needs to be woven into a story is expository information. The backstory of your characters, the history of the world, and the mechanics of everything in your story should come out through the story. The way the characters act, the way the town looks, the weird blue lightning coming out of the cheese grater, all of that will be apparent to the reader if you approach exposition in the right way. You will not need to have info dumps. You will not need to have these scenes that are just meant to deliver information to the reader if your scenes properly demonstrate all of the information that the reader needs to get. It will be easier for them to remember it. It will be easier for them to understand it. They will be more interested in it, and you will overall have a better novel. Speaking of overall, this video is all over. Damn, so close. Anyway, I'd love to hear what you think about this in the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.